How's it going, everybody?
You know who it is.
My name is Sanwoo, and in this part of the OPXY tutorial series, we are going to check out how we can use the external audio track in order to integrate effects pedals into our setup. We're going to test this with a stereo pedal, in this case the Maris LVX, a mono pedal, the Chase Bliss Mood, and both of them together in mono mode. But first, let's quickly talk about what we are trying to achieve here and why we are doing it. The goal is to ultimately be able to send one or multiple of our instrument tracks out of the external output into an effects unit and get the audio back into the OPXY. And the reason for doing that is simple, and that's because the OPXY only has 2 send effects available at any given time. And using an external effect allows us to add a third or maybe even a fourth effect on top of that. And also it allows you to be more flexible because you can choose your own effects and you're not limited to the ones that are available in the OPXY. And for example, if I'm using an external delay, I can use effect send 1, which I often have used by a delay, and make space for something else like a lo-fi effect. But enough talking, how do we set this up? First off, we want to go to the COM menu. And here you already see it says audio. If it doesn't, turn this knob and select audio. And it's important you make this selection before you plug anything into the aux output or multi-port or whatever you want to call it. Because after you plugged something in there, you cannot make any changes. And the cable I'm using is a simple 3.5mm TRS stereo cable split into 2 6mm TS mono cables. Then go into the inputs of my effect. And then using the same type of cable, we're going to go from the output of our effect into the audio input of the OPXY. And then we go back to our external audio track, track 5, and on page 1, we can select which input we want. Right now, the microphone is selected, but if we turn this knob, we can select headset, the TRS input, which is what we want, USB and the resampling option. But for now, let's go to the TRS input and press this knob in order to activate it. In addition, we can also select if we want this input to be in stereo or mono. We can do this by pressing Shift and turning this knob. So LR represents stereo. Then we can have the left mono or right mono. Sadly, there's no summing option yet. I hope they will integrate this in future. And because we're using a stereo pedal, we're going to switch this to be L and R. Now, next step, we're going to go to page 2 on this track. And here we can decide which of our 8 instrument tracks will send to this output and therefore into my effects unit. So if I wanted to, for example, send track 1 to this output, I would have to click here. So I'm editing this side and turn this knob in order to send all of its audio fully to this output. So let's play a quick loop and send some tracks into this. So I think you get the idea. So far, pretty simple. Sending effects, turning up the level you are sending it, and that's that. But now let's go back to page 1 and talk about an important parameter, and that is the mix parameter. By default, it is all the way up, but if we turn it down, it will remove all the tracks that we are sending to the external output from the main mix. So let me quickly illustrate this. I'm going to send track 6, all of its volume, to the external output. I'm going to mute all of my other tracks. So when I play this with mix all the way to 0, all I'm going to hear is the affected signal coming from the LVX. But if I turn this mix knob up, I will reintroduce the dry signal of this track into the main mix of the OPXY. And how you want to use this pretty much depends on your external effects unit. So many effects have a dry wet mix integrated in the device. Then you could leave this at 0. But if your effects unit doesn't have that, then you can just use this in order to balance your dry and wet signals. The next control here is the level control that you see at 75, which is its default value. And that is the level of the external input within the mixer. So if I go to my mixer, press it once, twice, and I'm on the external audio track, and I turn this down and now go back to my external audio track, you see that the level has changed. So these are the same level, just accessible at 2 different points on the device. And lastly, we have the drive parameter here, which allows you to add gain to your external input in case the level is too low. And just as the level control here is accessible at different points within the device, so are the send levels for my 8 instrument tracks to the external audio track. So I can turn them on and off or up and down here, but I can also do that on the instrument tracks themselves. So if I go to an instrument track, go to track 5, for example, and I go to the filter page. Now if I press Shift, you see that I have my external audio track up there. So I can determine how much of this track's volume or signal I will send to the external output. And this will be reflected on my external outputs page. See, 67 for track 5. And same here, 67. Next, let's try it out with a mono effect. In this case, I'm just using either the left or the right side of my output, plugging it into the input here. And then I do the same thing for my output and plug that in here. And then the only real difference here is that on the audio track, instead of selecting LR for my inputs, I gotta select R because I'm using the right side of the stereo cable going back into the OPXY. And if I press play, now I got a mono effect going. And now we're going to take it one step further and try to use both of these pedals at the same time in mono mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cable, so the other side of my OPXY's output, and plug that into the input here. So I've got one side of the output here going into the mood and one into the LVX. And then I take the other side that belongs to this cable that's going into the input and plug that into the LVX's output. So now the way I've set it up is that whatever goes to the external output and is on the left side will go into the LVX and then back out the LVX to the external input on the left side. And same for the external output's right side. Everything that goes out there will go into the mood, back out into the right side of my external audio input. And now I got to select my external input source again. So I turn this to L and R because I want to hear both effects, the one on the left and the one on the right. Sadly, there is no option yet to sum these to both channels, which is a bit annoying. There are workarounds for that. We're going to get into that in a second. But I assume they will implement that at some point in future, that you can sum both of them and make this setup more effective. Nevertheless, for now, we go left and right stereo. And you can clearly hear that mood was on the right channel if you're listening with headphones or stereo speakers, and the LVX was on the left side, which obviously isn't ideal, which is why now I'm going to sum these both inputs before they go into the OPXY. There are different ways of doing that, of course, using a mixer or a simple summing cable. In this case, I'm going to do a workaround and use my KO2. The cable that goes into the external input on the OPXY instead is going into the KO2's input. The KO2's output is going into the OPXY. Now I go into the sample menu on the KO2 in order to select my inputs. And what I'm going to do, instead of using stereo, I press minus and use mono, and you can hear that instead of getting different signals left and right, I'm getting the same signal of both sides combined through the middle. But we aren't done here yet, because this setup doesn't really make sense unless we want to send different tracks to these different effects. And the way to do this is simply by panning our tracks left or right. So I have tracks 1 and track 6 sent to my aux output. So I'm going to send track 1 to the left side and track 6 to the right side. Go to the mixer, track 1, pan it left, track 6, pan it right. And so here I'm affecting my drums. And my synth track I'm affecting here. And although this example was maybe not too musical, you can see that you can effectively have 4 different send effects at the same time, 2 internally, 2 externally, which is pretty cool. What's not so cool is that you cannot sum the left and the right channel in the device itself yet. I think they're going to fix it in future. So for now, silly workarounds are the method. But please let me know down in the comments, have you tried using external effects with the OPXY yet? If so, what are your findings? And I want to say thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you want to learn more about the OPXY, check the video or contact me for private online lessons. Peace.